Sarah Williams Leng is joining us today with the IC Topic Chats. She's going to do a book discussion on the Antiracist Business Book. She's joining us from a park area, and so she's working off a hotspot. So there's a chance she might be in a little bit of a lag. We're prepared for that. That happens. Hopefully, I don't have to present the book because I did read it, but I don't know if I'm ready to present it. So anyway, Sarah, why don't you give a little bit of a background and take it over, and I'll be quiet now.
Okay, thanks, Matt. Hey, everybody. If at any point you can't hear me, start waving or tell me in chat. I did not plan to do this off location, but here I am. Plans change. So I wanted to share with our group a book that I read called the Antiracist Business Book, and thought that it would be really great to discuss it with my fellow independent consultants. And I wanted to check in with you for a moment, just to ask you to provide 1 to 2 words to describe how you're feeling coming to this meeting to talk about the Antiracist Business Book. So if you want to add it to the chat. And thanks everybody for introducing yourselves as well. I'm going to introduce myself in a little bit. Excited and curious, interested in ways to incorporate this in my business. Oh, Matt, you went over 2 words. I think I'm coming in excited and nervous because I don't like public speaking, and I consider anything that is in a group of 1 or more to be public speaking. Intrigued and eager, hopeful and actionable. This is great. Thank you, everybody. Keep it coming. Interested and expansive, excited, allyship. Wonderful. Thank you so much. We're gonna start off with a land acknowledgement. So I am an independent consultant who lives and works on the land of the original inhabitants of Eastern Pennsylvania, the Lenape Nation. I pay respect and I honor the caretakers of this land. If you would like, you could take a moment to acknowledge the original inhabitants of the land you are now residing on by adding it in the chat or just reflecting on it in your own personal way. And I'd also like to bring up a privilege statement, which Trudy LeBron, the author, is a DEI coach, and she started having her clients write privilege statements as an act of transparency and self-reflection. And that allows us to be mindful of how we're coming into the space and also gives others context of where we're coming from. And privilege isn't something to be ashamed about or something that means that you haven't had to work hard for where you are, but it does mean that simply that you have things. And some of these things are inherited and some of these are earned. And things that are earned may be your education, but things that are inherent are things like your race, your citizenship of the country you're residing in, if that's your case, or not living with a disability that requires accommodations to live and work each day. I am a white, non-disabled, heterosexual, cisgendered woman, and I grew up in a middle-class family and am now in an upper middle-class family living in a suburban, predominantly white, middle-class neighborhood. I've graduated with a graduate degree and I'm self-employed. And I co-parent with my husband 2 young kids. And I'm also going to share Trudy LeBron's statement that she shared in her book. She identifies as a light-skinned, cisgendered, non-disabled, biracial, Latina, raised by two parents who were employed. She is bilingual and a citizen of the United States. And she's in a long-term committed relationship with a supportive partner and co-parent. However, she goes into her background, which was, she talks about moving in and out of privileged identities. So she was a teen mother and lived in poverty and had to really struggle a lot in life, while also working to obtain her master's degree. And now she is ABD in a PhD program. Well, as of this publishing this book, I did take this program. And so Trudy LeBron has spent a decade working in the DEI space, and she also acknowledges that she lives on stolen land of the Podunk people in central Connecticut. So I just thank you for giving the space to start off with those pieces. Another thing that she talks about in her book is to have community agreements so that we're all coming to the space with with a shared agreement of how our space is going to be conducted and held. So the one, I put 3 here, and if you have any more to add, please feel free to speak up or add them to the chat. But for the sake of time, I am, but you're creating them with each group that you're making. So practice getting comfortable being uncomfortable. This is a topic that we don't always talk about unless you're really purposefully doing it. So we're gonna be uncomfortable, and that's a natural feeling, and it's something that we all should just get used to. And listen to hear and not to respond. So take the time to digest instead of reactive responses. And then use yes and statements, which would be, she talks about this as well, like instead of, when you use yes but statements, it's kind of negating the other person's perspective. And we all have perspectives and they're all valid. So try to use yes and statements when possible. They're all valid, and whether or not they're correct or reasonable, that's how we get through these conversations, is talking through them. And yeah, Matt, I definitely resonated with practice getting uncomfortable. So this book, she talks about how the larger entrepreneurial, online business, and personal development world holds some harmful narratives that she experienced, which is basically like most personal development books are linked with money and status, and personal development is like this privileged space that's held really for white people who are, because our culture is enmeshed in white supremacy. So she refers to this as white people shit, and basically it's like encompasses all the things that white people can do because of our combination of privilege, access, historical precedent, social norms, and just being able to basically fit the general social script that's predominant. And then she also talks about how like these are based on the power to change your life is within you if ... if you're white. So so this is where she's coming from, and from her years in the DEI space, she brought this book to bring to the public. LeBron, she breaks it down by three sections, but basically in the first one, she talks about the history and present state of our racist capitalist society, and she reviews deep racial disparities in terms of employment, earnings, and wealth. Let me turn off mine. I see, Jennifer, that I'm having bandwidth issues. I'm so sorry about that. Let me know if this helps. So, yeah, no, thanks, Jennifer. I know, but this was not intended to have to go on a hotspot. I want to hold space for action and like talking about how we can build anti-racist businesses. So I'm going to skip over this part, but it doesn't mean that it's not important. So be sure to keep yourself, if you need to know about it or need a refresher, like her whole first chapter or her whole first part is about this. Can somebody tell me if it sounds any better now?
It sounds great, Sarah. I was just typing that in. You sound like you're coming through very, very clearly now that your camera's off. So maybe that's the trick.
Okay. So Marcella, I hear you. She said we should add age to the privilege statement. As an older woman, I'm starting to feel a victim of ageism. Yeah, I hear you on that. I mean, I'm what maybe you'd refer to now, we'd refer to as middle-aged, but that is another ism that people get stuck in and get affected by. So the next part would be just quickly, because I'm not sure where everybody's coming from in the anti-racism space and work. So I'm just gonna touch on this where anti-racism, the goals of anti-racism are equity and justice. So basically like we should carry out policies, practices, and worldviews that dismantle all forms of racism, exploitation, oppression. And we basically, our goal is to live in a world where people are not defined, basically their race or any other aspects of their identity, like age, are not predictors of their life outcomes. And LeBron believes that businesses are an important part of this larger shift because we're anti-racist society because of our heavy interactions with them. And they hold such an important ability to create anti-racist policies that support workers' well-being and also create economic equity. And she says that we're basically going to have to disrupt and dismantle all the policies and practices that reproduce the status quo. And it's about becoming anti-racist entrepreneurs, leaders, service providers, workers, and creators that see our work as a part of the puzzle to creating a more equitable world. And this requires a transformation in the way that we're doing our business. LeBron holds a whole chapter on this concept. Like show of hands if you've heard it. It's not personal, it's just business. Yeah, so I see a lot. So I've heard it a lot, and you know, it's an expression that LeBron points out that is basically personalization, and that's only going to lead to dehumanization. So it's an ideology or a concept that allows people to take advantage and make choices that without like understanding or considering the lasting impact on other people because of those choices. So being an anti-racist business practitioner requires us to make it personal. All of our decisions hold a lot of power, and we need to recognize that. So she asks us, for the first thing to do is to repersonalize your business. Whether you're starting off your business or you've been in your business for 30 years, she gives us 5 things we can do. I like this because I'm a very practical person, and I kind of like live on lists, which is good and bad, but this gives you I liked her 5 ways you can personalize your business. So the first is when you make any decisions, think about, like, talk to the people that are going to be impacted. So if you are going to change the hours of your work, or you're going to pick up a new project, you have you have employees or subcontractors, or maybe you're shifting the way you do business and you need to understand how that's going to affect your current clients. By asking them, you're understanding real life implications, and you're also understanding side effects that you can't particularly see without asking others. And then using check-in questions. So I did that at the beginning of this call because it just helps to understand where people are coming from. I've been in situations where, you know, and especially with the pandemic, like we don't know people's personal lives, and you can come to a meeting with a lot, and it just helps to adjust and understand where everybody is during that time period, and it humanizes people. Examine your own identity and privilege. This is a lifelong project, and it helps us become better models for uncomfortable conversations and more sensitive to others' identities and how our privilege and identity intercepts with our businesses. If you have a decision, if you have to make a decision that will have a negative impact on someone, consider ways to minimize the harm. So basically give time for people to adjust and be open about what's going to happen, even if you don't know what's going to happen. Because she talks about like how you could help someone or give advance notice or severance packages if you're going to have to lay people off. Like it's a lot of, well, that's a horrible expression, but that's a lot of being open about what's happening and remembering that every decision you make has consequences. And FYI, I am a solopreneur, so some of this stuff is not necessarily applicable to me, but you can actually, it would be if I just apply it to my clients or my community at large that I'm trying to impact. And reprioritize humans. So we do a lot of, if you're a business owner, you may be talking about production expertise, and those things are all tied to monetary value, but it's really important to consider self-care, health, and family time when you're talking about your the people that you're working with. So does anybody, well, I guess I'll go through the presentation and then take time to reflect. But if anybody has anything to say about that in the chat, please speak up. But since I'm trying to work with limited Wi-Fi, I'll just go through the presentation. So Ron is identifying that we currently live in toxic capitalism, and she argues that she argues for just commerce, which is a new guide to doing business. And within this, you're basically approaching commerce as it is the exchange of goods and services, but you're bringing into it justice as a measure of success. So it's going to center the goals of anti-racism, and it aims to be the kind of economic model that repairs our relationship. And it's also connecting to the idea that you can build wealth while releasing the connections that capitalism has, and the harmful emotional and psychological connections that capitalism has produced. And then I didn't want to skip over this because as an evaluator, I love that she has ways that you could measure individual and collective health within a obviously I can't read chats and present at the same time, but you can in just commerce you would be able to measure your individual and collective health. And so for example, like mandatory minimum wages would create this ability that nobody has to work a second job because they can actually afford their life based on what they're making in their specific job. Universal basic income, Medicare for all, these things that would lift up everyone and create equitable changes. And there were a couple comments in here. I really appreciated Trudy's perspectives on making friends with money. Oh yes, I'm gonna talk about that, Matt. And Marcella said, identity and privilege play out differently with immigrants. Has anyone studied this dynamic and how it manifests itself in this country? That will be interesting to discuss. Thank you for bringing that up. So part 2 is the meaty stuff, building your anti-racist business. She just wants us to start off with our values, really. So if you've ever done like the core values practice where you really like write out all of your values and then you take time to reflect and bring it down to like 5 core values. She asked us to ask these questions to make sure that our core values are aligning with anti-racist policy and practice. And if they aren't, it doesn't mean that they're bad values or inappropriate values. It just means that you need a checks and balances system to make sure that you're accommodating for this, for the tendency. So she uses examples like competition, efficiency, and independence might cause you to start skipping over collaboration and power sharing. And in that way, like, you need to figure out how you're going to account for that in the way you do business. And she does call out solopreneurs. She said it can be especially hard for us that as we continue to lead with our values, when we're the only ones making all of these decisions and we may not take time to reflect on them. So she talks about like ways to identify if you're misaligned. And then she calls out like common business practices that can create a lot of harm through oppression and exploitation. And these are 4 examples. But I mean, we've talked about it where like valuing education over competence or experience can really limit your ability to work with some really great people from diverse backgrounds. That's all, if you're already cutting off a whole group of people based on education status. And duties as assigned, which is actually, I've totally been there in a role where it isn't completely defined and you just start getting pile up of, oh, did I get kicked out?
You're good.
Am I still here?
No, you're still here.
Okay.
Yep, you're fine. I think Marcella might have turned off her screen just to keep your internet going just fine. You're great.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. It's a team sport. Performative action versus full alignment. Brown is asking us to make a full alignment by defining your commitments and being specific on what they are and clear about the actions. And she gives us some questions to review, and also to not push ahead and like make a big statement about it when we're not really sure how this will be playing out. We need to understand who has ownership over the commitments, and things like if you're going to increase the diversity of your hires through different social identities, you are to have to probably do a lot more work on the front end by the recruitment efforts and taking more time in the process. So it's about like making sure you understand the timelines of these things. And creating intentional space. She gives a lot of good ideas and good guidelines. I talked about community guidelines. Accountability for there. I really appreciate this because I think that she got a, I'm not going to reflect on her words accurately, but basically like a lot can be done because we don't know how to approach situations to repair, to account for them and repair. So she gives us a framework to do that. That's on this slide. And then also build trust, because then you know that if somebody needs to be held accountable, they will be, and this is how. And then the money mindset. As she talked about her struggle with her money mindset, and it's really a common struggle for business practitioners trying to approach anti-racist practices, and basically just a lot of people approaching business because we are socialized to believe that to help others we must give up our own our wealth and well-being. You can see this in the nonprofit sector. That's what she calls nonprofit syndrome, which is a set of beliefs that are perpetuated by nonprofits and public organizations, where it trains professionals to accept the conditions of scarcity of resources. So, okay, so the so basically, like, since we're socialized with this money mindset, it causes us to have an unconscious bias about our decision-making and behavior. But she comes us back to the goals of anti-racism, which are equity and freedom. It's not about martyrdom or living in poverty. And we do not have to buy into the idea that money is the devil, basically. My words, not hers. But ways to get over this, she talks about, is make actual friends with people who have money. If you're from like a lower economic standing, or you're just not comfortable with money, she talks about how, like, to make friends with money and understand how it can be used for good, and what you don't like about having a lot of money, and like basically just get more familiar with it. And also understand what makes you valuable beyond just those like just educational value. Just understand your own value and what you're bringing to your work. Yes, that's where I'm at. And find your own freedom number. So this is what you want to live by, the amount you need to live the life you want to live. And it's different for everyone. So play with the numbers. And then on the next one, this is what Matt said. She has an equity-centered pricing and sales framework. And she just goes back into equity being about ensuring that people have what they need to thrive and grow, and that people need different support in order to achieve the same goals. So we should anchor our own pricing strategy in actual costs, and this helps us keep our money mindset in check. And finally, part 3 is all about liberatory leadership, which is a leadership style rooted in anti-racism and the advancement of the collective. So this approach centers justice, transparency, responsibility, and participation. And it's about owning your power and using it to lift up, empower, include, and create opportunities that allows people to increase their self-determination, self-efficacy, and ultimately their freedom. And these are some liberatory leadership practices she goes over. I really like them. She goes into a lot of detail. I'm not going to take time on this because we can get discussion. But one other piece I liked is she also goes into how to measure impact, and how there's dimensions, there's duration. And of course, I loved it as an evaluator, but that could be another discussion all in itself. So I really appreciate the time being able to talk to you about this. And LeBron's book gave me a lot of like practical tips and a lot of thoughts, a lot of thought processing about how I can build my business as an anti-racist business and help contribute to the greater anti-racist society that we all should be striving for. So with that, stop share.
Okay, and we'll just say goodbye to all the YouTube folks, and everybody else stick around. We can talk about this some more. And maybe when you stop sharing, it should be, maybe it'll ease up your bandwidth a little bit there, Sarah. All right, thanks everybody out in YouTube land. Everybody here, stick around.